Hello, welcome back to the channel. So Harmony is probably the strongest path in the whole game, having some of the most valuable and basically necessary characters for some teams to even work. But there are some characters in the path that have been kind of forgotten about, so I wanted to kind of talk about some of them, and you'll see some of the design problems they have and why they aren't really used as much as the other ones. Now I do want to say that I don't think any of these characters are like unusably bad. Like, you can still make them work, because even like the worst Harmony characters are better than a lot of other characters, since you're always going to need a support on your team. But they do definitely have some things that are holding them back from being like great. Let's start with Asta, who, like, does anyone even remember that she exists half the time? Like, I feel like people only really use her at the start of the game because you get her for free, and then you just don't really ever use her again once you get better options. The main problem with Asta is a couple of things. One, you are kind of relying on RNG to get max stacks, since the skill could just only hit 2 enemies and you're only going to get like 2 charges. Maybe 3 if the enemy has a fire weakness. And on top of that, if you're like fighting a boss, or if the fight just doesn't have that many enemies, you're not even going to be able to get maximum stacks anyway. And getting maximum stacks is really important, because at 5 stacks, it gets 70% attack buff, which is really good, but a lot of the time you're just not going to be able to hit that. And on top of that, the stacks going down by 3 every turn just makes her really inconsistent and kind of hard to get full value out of a lot of the time, compared to all the other Harmony characters who can kind of just keep their buff on basically permanently most of the time, or at least for like a couple of turns, you know. Her Eidolons do kind of help with this, especially her E6, you know, reducing the amount of charges lost down to 2, but that still doesn't really solve the problem of the stacks being kind of inconsistent to get, because you have to hit a different enemy every time, instead of it just only being like a enemy. So her needing to basically skill every turn to keep up charges makes her probably one of the more heavy SP supports, which makes her not really that great of an option when a lot of the newer supports can kind of just skill once and have the buff active for multiple turns. Now, I do think that effect might be a bit too good on Asta, and would kind of, you know, ruin the whole gimmick of her, because at max charges, it does give, you know, 70% attack, which is a lot, and, you know, to the whole team, not just one character. I think if you just made it so she got a charge for just hitting an enemy, instead of having to be a different enemy for every hit, it would make her feel like a lot better to use, because you could get charges a lot more consistently. Then you also have the other side of that, which is her ultimate. Giving 50 speed for 2 turns is really good. The problem is that that's all it does. It just gives 50 speed, and that's it. And with a lot of characters now having easy access to action advance forward, and other Harmony characters just doing a lot more with their ults, it just makes it kind of underwhelming now. And even on like her Eidolons, the only other thing that it does is just make it so that she can't lose charge stacks, which isn't really that helpful. I mean, it is helpful, but it doesn't really make it that much better. Maybe if it immediately gave her 2 or 3 charge stacks whenever she used it, I could see it being better, since you wouldn't have to solely rely on her skill to get the attack buff. So you know, it would make her a lot less SP heavy than she is right now. But yeah, you know, another problem, like most early characters, her traces kind of suck. Her A2 kind of just makes no sense with the rest of her kit. Like, why does she have Bird? And on her basic attack, which you almost never want to use because you want to just constantly use her skill to keep up the charges. It just doesn't make any sense. Her A4 is like kind of weird, because I could see it being good. The problem is that, like, mono fire has never really been an actual thing. The only real mono team that has ever really worked is mono quantum, and like every other fire DPS that you would want to use kind of just wants another more specialized support. You know, Firefly would rather use Ron May, and, you know, Topaz would rather use someone like Robin. But I think that if mono fire ever does become a thing, I could see Asta being good in that team. But, I mean, they would probably just make another support for that team, let's be honest. Her A6 is, like, okay, but I feel like most other defensive passives, they don't really need them. I feel like you could just give her anything else and it would be fine. And also, you know, because of the inconsistent nature of the charges, you could just not really get that much defense, and it just not really do that much to actually keep her alive. And that is just the main problem with Asta. She is just inconsistent compared to a lot of the other options. It just doesn't really do enough to really want most people to use her. Now, like, she can be decent if you, like, really need a lot of speed, but then again, the action advance forward is so readily available now that it's not even that useful now. But moving on from Asta is someone who kind of just like came out, and then no one really talks about them ever now, which is Hanya. I don't know. Hanya feels so close to being good, but it's almost like they saw her kid and then preemptively nerfed her because they thought she would be too good. Like that's really what it feels like. Because the numbers on her just don't make any sense. The main problem is the burden debuff that she gives to enemies with her skill, because it only activates every 2 attacks, which makes it so slow since it doesn't immediately give you a skill point back, and you basically have to wait maybe a couple 2 turn cycles to get the full effect from it. And it can only trigger twice. You're only really getting a net positive of 1 skill point if you have to use one to put burden on the enemy. And also because it's on her skill, you mean her to be really fast so she can basically just constantly apply burden to the enemy, which just makes her really hard to play a lot of the time. I think that if burden maybe just triggered every hit, it would make her a decent option on skill point team. And then maybe also make the triggers go up to 3 so that burden doesn't just go away too fast. Actually allows Hanya to apply the skill again. Because the rest of her kit, besides for her traces, which I'll get into in a second, is good. It's just the problem that burden just sucks. Which is basically the main part of her kit. But I do think the thing that really hurts Hanya right now is the fact that Sparkle exists. Sparkle is so much better as a skill point support, it is not even close. She gives you 4 skill points immediately for free, and also buffs damage based on how many skill points you use, so she is way better for skill point teams. Characters like Embodied Lene, or especially Archer. And on top of that, Hanya's traces just suck. Yeah, I know, shocking, another 1.8 character having terrible traces. Her A2 is the only one that I would really say is decent, since it is free attack, even if it is sometimes hard to get value out of since burden only triggers every 2 attacks, and the buff only lasts for 1 turn. Her A4 just doesn't really make any sense because you aren't going to want to put burden on a smaller enemy, since you might end up just killing the enemy with 1 attack and just not getting the proc anyway because it takes 2 hits to activate. And also you're going to want it on a bigger enemy so you can actually get all of the procs. This just feels so counterintuitive, I don't know. I guess maybe it's because in case you get the first proc and then it kills the enemy, so it gives you the skill point anyway, but I feel like that should just be how her skill works and not be, a trace for her, Her A6 could be good, but the fact that it only gives 2 energy makes it basically useless. I get wanting to give her something for, energy, because her ultimate has a pretty high energy cost, but only 2 energy is going to barely fill the bar at all. And it just doesn't help her at all with her energy problems. I mean, at least her Eidolons are good, but it's kind of the only thing she really has going for her. I don't know, the main problem is that she just feels so slow to play and to actually get value out of that it's why would you not just use anyone else? At the end of the day, like I said earlier, you can make these characters work, and they aren't as bad as some other options, especially a lot of 4-star DPSs. But just because you can make a character work doesn't mean that they don't have problems in their kits and don't need buffs. Someone like Celia, you can make Celia work, but that doesn't change the fact that there is stuff in her kit that just makes no sense, and in general she just needs buffs because it is a lot harder for her to compete now in the current content. And Hanya and Asta, compared to a lot of the newer Harmony characters, just don't really hold up and do just need something to make them feel better to play and just be better in general, because they're obviously never going to be as good as some of the insane new ones like Tribute or something, but I do think if you just change their kits slightly, they would at least be decent options, But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.